one of the issues that I had like early on in the layoff journey was figuring out like, okay, how long do I take a break for, and when do I get back into it? So there's no one to really tell you that. So it's really a positive, but it presents as a con at the beginning. It's like there is no set structure for how to handle a situation like this, and there's no right or wrong way to do it. It's just the way that works best for you. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Foreign Gems.
Yeah, welcome everyone. I am Ola King.
And I'm Mac Odemba.
Yeah, so this is Foreign Gems, where we bring you foreign perspectives to familiar topics. And we might sound rusty today, and that's because we've taken a few weeks to explore, grow, to just enjoy life, and so that we can bring you fresh perspectives to share. So that's what we're talking about today.
Yeah, it was the longest break that we've taken. So we recorded like a bunch of episodes all in a row. I think we did 16, 17 episodes week after week. And this is the first time we took like an extended break from recording. We had some in the bank, which is why we kept releasing as time went by. But now we're finally back to recording. I'm catching up with Ola for the first time in about a month, maybe even 5 weeks.
And 7 weeks.
7 weeks it's
Yeah,
been?
7
No
weeks.
way. Wow, time flies. So yeah, today we thought we'd do a bit of an update episode. A few episodes ago, I can't remember which one it was now, I think probably 6 or 7, I let everybody know like my experience with layoffs and how that all happened. And now it's been a really long time since I experienced that, so I want to give a bit of an update on how life has been since that and how I'm navigating this new reality for myself. And Ola as well is going to share some of his experiences as well.
Yeah, so that was episode 6, which one of our guests, Fez, mentioned that he learned quite a lot from. So y'all should check it out as well. And I learned a lot after my layoff as well. It helps put things in perspective for me, and which is what Foreign Gems is about, providing perspectives.
For sure. I'm excited to talk about this, not because layoffs are a particularly exciting topic, but the growth potential that happens after you have a layoff is very exciting for me. I'm always interested to see how people handle their own layoffs. Like I know that the way I'm doing it is just one way, and how other people are going to feel about it is going to be sort of different. So now we're kind of talking from a similar perspective, but different because we're different individuals. I think it's going to be really interesting to kind of hear your perspective as well on how you've been handling the situation.
Yeah, I'm excited to explore what comes out of my mind and yours as well, to see. We both generally have had a similar attitude towards it,
Yes.
but you never quite know what the day-to-day is. So it would be nice to know how it's been for you. So how has it been, Mac?
So for those of you who maybe didn't get a chance to listen to that episode yet, don't know the story, I got laid off towards the end of March after working at a tech company for a year and a few months. I think it was like a year and 3 months, somewhere around there. It came as a bit of a surprise, and so at the time when it first happened, I remember like the first few days, a bit of a shock situation, not really sure what I was going to do next. But very quickly after the next few days, I think that's when I recorded that episode, and through a lot of support from my friends, network, family, I had gained a pretty good perspective already on it, and like I felt pretty positive about the situation and what I could turn it into. And so that's what I've been working on for the last few months. For those of you that don't know, my career has been in marketing, particularly in tech. And so I decided to take my consulting work full time, because I was always doing that on the side a little bit. And that's what I've been up to for the last little while, is trying to grow that. And a lot of these episodes that we've been talking about have come as a direct response to the new needs that I have in this new part of my career. Things like personal branding, networking, all of those episodes were really inspired by these new facets of career that I now need to put more time and effort into. So I'll talk a little bit about that, because I think that's where I've seen the most personal growth. But then there's also other areas that are to do more so with mindset and like how to show up every day that I think will also be useful to talk about, especially if you're, have experienced a layoff or are thinking about going full time by yourself. These things I think could be a little bit useful. That sound good?
Yeah, that sounds actually, from an outside perspective, that seems like what I've noticed, that you've been more focused on.
Yeah.
And I've liked seeing that, you seem to have been growing more professionally in your own
Appreciate that, man.
solopreneur slash, you just seem more confident in your own ideas. And it inspired me a little bit because, well, not a little bit, a lot, because yours happened 2 months before mine. For me, a lot of mine has been, I mentioned in a previous episode about my startup experience, and that led me into the personal development world. But the thing about personal development is, as you develop yourself, opportunities will come in life, you start doing better in life generally, but you never get to test yourself on a lot of the things. I was learning things like gratitude, I was learning things about positive mindset, but there was never an opportunity to test those ideas. Like, it's easy to be grateful when things are great, but can you be grateful when things are not quite as well? Can you still be positive? So it was an opportunity, at least that's how I saw it. I saw it as an opportunity to finally be able to face the dark side of life and see if I can keep my light.
I love that. I love that you mentioned that being able to exercise these ideas and concepts that but when it's time for you to test them in action, it can be a little bit more difficult, to go ahead and do it. And this is a nice segue into kind of my initial experience when I started working, quote unquote, for myself. I still have clients, so I have people I'm accountable to, but my time is accountable to me. So one of the big things that was a challenge early on was navigating my day. So I was so used to how my day would work out before. So like when I had a job, I had to be in certain meetings at certain times. Therefore, my work day was a certain period in the day. But now that period can kind of be shifted everywhere, it took me a while to find a good balance between doing the things that I wanted to do every day, so the things that I complained I couldn't do as much of when I was working full time, but then also being able to show up for my clients, being able to work on the business and things like this. So one of the changes that I realized is, like, you need to figure out where your energy levels are throughout the day. So like, when is it a good time for you to be exercising? When is it a good time for you to be eating? What happens in the afternoon? Like, do you have an afternoon slump, and how to work around that? Things like this. And so one of the things that I realized about my day is that I actually prefer to do all of the more administrative things early on in the day. So for me, it's exercise, maybe it's like grocery shopping, things that require me to like maybe leave the house. I like to do those really early on so that I have the rest of the day to focus on doing the actual work. And that for me has worked tremendously. Whereas before, I was working for a company that, their time zone is in the East Coast. So I actually have to start the day pretty early. And then I was trying to get everything done in the afternoon. And I actually realized that wasn't working as well for me. Like, a lot of the time, I would feel kind of tired after work, which is a very common experience, I'm sure. And I didn't really have the motivation to go and do some of these other administrative things. So I started to apply this concept of like winning the day really early. And it's something that I'd heard about a lot, and I was applying it at work, where I would like try to do all the most important tasks like first thing in the morning. But now my tasks are beyond work. Like, I consider all of these things to be things that I need to get done throughout the day, not this is a priority and then these other things need to suffer as a result of it. And so now I'm juggling these things as if they're all like equal priority, and then figuring out, okay, which ones are the things that must get done, and I try and get them done really early in the day. And then it gives me the rest of the day to kind of do the more admin type work and things like that. And so that's something that I've started to really appreciate and find to know more about myself in terms of how I like to approach a day. And having the freedom to move things around has done wonders for me in terms of energy levels. Like, I feel like when the day is done, it's like a really complete day where I got everything done a lot more often than not these days.
I like that. I really like that. I think I can learn from that as well, because I'm not quite at that stage of my post-layoff journey yet.
Yeah.
But a lot of those things you mentioned, I've tried that in the past, like, winning the day. Some people like to use lifting the boulders. So like, what are the most important things that you need to get done in a day? Like, every day you should have 1 or 2 boulders that you lift, and then everything else is like little rocks where If you don't get them done, you'll still be fine.
Not mission critical.
Yeah, I previously wrote an article about kissing the frog. It's a lot of the things I still agree with, but just like when you write things, years later you learn that, okay, this could be better. I haven't updated that yet, but that's something I'll go back and read. I was actually talking to one of my friends recently, and she's considering a move away from where she lives right now.
Yep.
And she mentioned that an article that I wrote years ago is what she's using to help her reach the goal. And I was mind blown because I didn't even remember this. And then she told me, then I went back and read it, and I was like, oh my God, this is so applicable to me right now.
Hey, a message from the past.
Yeah, I was like, and this is why I wrote in my bio, like I think I wrote that, like, I write these things as a reminder to my future self. At the time it was more aspirational then, but now it's like, oh my God, it actually played out that way, because reading that quickly, I remembered everything, but in the moment, it was not something that I thought of. So yeah.
Oh man, you gotta send me a link. Actually, maybe we should put a link in the show notes as well.
We will.
Maybe some more people could find that useful as well if they're navigating a similar situation.
Yeah.
And by the way, everything that we're gonna discuss in this episode doesn't pertain necessarily to a layoff, but it could pertain maybe if you're looking to make a change in your life or a really big change has happened in your life. These are just tools that we've used in order to stay grounded and make sure that we are moving forward in a way that's going to be more beneficial than the life that we had previously, essentially.
Yeah, I agree. For just a explanation of what the thing is, it's like I think I used 4D goal execution framework. Okay, I should come up with a better name. Yeah. But it's the desire, the decision, then the design, and the discipline. So what you mentioned, the reason why I brought that up, what you mentioned is more on the discipline aspect. So that's why I said you are a bit ahead in your layoff journey than I am. So you know what you want to do now, you're working on them. Now you just need to build the discipline to execute correctly. For me, I'm still backwards in my layoff journey. So there's the desire, which is what do you even want? So that's what I've spent the last few weeks doing, to understand myself, to go back to my roots and trying to understand what are my desires, what should I be doing next. In the past, Lord knows, 6-7 years, I've learned so much. I've grown in so many ways. What's this current version of me? What's the next Ola 5.0 or whatever? What does that look like?
This new version.
Yeah, so that's the desire. And then once I have reached the desire, I think I have the data that I need now, is just to sit down and decide, which is the next step. And then I will create a design to achieve
that life,
and then the discipline. So we can exchange tips,
and
we could talk about all of these things later on as well at some point.
And let us know if that's something that's like very interesting to you, is how we're figuring this out, because this is very real time. If that's super interesting and you'd like for us to dive deeper into those topics and into various challenges that we're facing as we navigate our situations, then let us know. We'll be happy to dive a little bit deeper into. We don't want to dwell too much on it if you'd rather us, we get back to the more actionable topics. But for us, this is us applying some of the things that we've talked about before. So I think it's almost like we're guests on the podcast as well, because when we bring guests on, it's usually excellent examples of applications of topics we've talked about in the past. And so this is kind of our contribution to that. It's like, how do we apply these concepts that we talk about? We hope that all of these things that we discuss will be also useful and applicable in your life. So please share your stories too. We'd be happy to hear that and comment on them as well in the pod.
Now that I'm thinking about it, let's actually go. First of all, what do you think of that framework? Because it's something that I came up with, and I think it has stood the test of time. They call it the Lindy effect. Yeah. The longer an idea stays, the more you can trust the idea. I found, for me, when I wrote the article, it's something that I didn't formulate, but I noticed as a trend of how I tend to achieve goals. That was like 4 years after I noticed that, and then I wrote that, and now it's like 4 years after I wrote the article. So it's survived for 8 years, I should say. What do you think? Where's the O's in that? And let's see how you've applied that for your journey?
No, I think the 4Ds are very much a real thing. The part that I would perhaps, and I mean, we didn't explicitly mention this, but when I listened to it the first time when you're telling me about the 4Ds, I was thinking, okay, this is like a linear progression. And the more I think about it, as we're having this discussion, the more I realize it's like iterative in itself. So like you can go through various stages of the 4Ds. You know how you mentioned you're at the design stage or you're at the discipline stage. You have your design, so like now you need to make the discipline to make it happen. That could be in one aspect. So perhaps it's like my calendar for the day, right, and the way I achieve things. But in the way maybe that I go find new clients, I could still very much be in the desire or in the design phase. So you're gonna be constantly going through this framework. It's not like I'll read this article once and it'll be useful to me. I can see this being very useful over time as you tackle various things. But then within those things too, once you've actually got the discipline out, for example, say, and I have discipline, right? And I'm doing this timeline every single day. Maybe I then realize, wait, this isn't giving me the results that I thought it would when I was back in the desire and design stage. So I'm gonna need to go back and kind of iterate on that and say, okay, maybe I changed this. Maybe I moved the exercise section to like a different part, or maybe I need to spend whole days focused on like work versus like a whole day focused on play or exercise or whatever it may be. So I don't know that yet. I'm just going through this first kind of reimagination of my day. And then once I've lived that for a while, I'll probably have to go back again to the desire stage and think, okay, what is missing? And then how can I add that into what I have going on?
I like that y'all can't hear me, see me smiling, but as Mark was saying that, I was smiling because that was one of the things I recognized, and it was in an updated version of that, where I was like, it's not a linear process. Yeah. It's very self-referential. It's like a network, and within each one, it references itself as well. So if you're trying to create a desire, for example, you have to be disciplined about wanting to know your desire. Yeah. You know, you have to know what you want and actually like do the work to find what you want. If you don't know what you want, you have to find a framework that helps you find your design, which is the design. So you're finding a design for your desire. Yeah. So each one, it's not one versus the other. It's not one after the other. It's just these are the four things or four components that always come into play when you're going after a goal, and whatever order you take, it's everything falls back to those four things I found.
So now that you're this far along your quote unquote layoff journey, and you mentioned you have the desire, you've got that like a picture of that in your mind. Can you talk a little bit more about how you came to, so the layoff happened, you have this opportunity now to think about how you want your life to go. So that's the trigger essentially for you to figure out what the desire is. But now you have a desire. Can you tell us what you're thinking and then also how you arrived at that conclusion?
Yeah. When the layoff happened, I was actually laughing in the meeting, and I'm pretty sure they thought I was having like a breakdown. I was like, I promise this is not a breakdown. This is just nice because I'd been feeling stagnant for a while. And as Mark has mentioned in the previous episode, like I come off as a storyteller because I am a storyteller and I see my life as a story. And a long time ago, I just decided I didn't want to like live based on anyone's script, anyone's anything. And the most authoritative figure in my life is my mom. And I discussed that with her. I was like, this is how I'm going to be, just a heads up. Like some of the things I do might not make sense to anyone, but it's intentional, and just trust that I mean well and it would make sense eventually. So I've always seen my life like a story in a way. So when the layoff happened, the first thing was, what would make a great story? Like if I was writing a story, what would this be? And then we talked about storytelling, the arc of storytelling, then and but. So maybe I mixed that up. But something happens, you're trying to get to your goal, but this happens, then. So for me, I'm trying to advance my career, but I got laid off. Now what happens to that?
Next.
It's like, awesome. This is an opportunity for me to go understand myself better. I'd already had a trip planned to go to Brazil, every year for my birthday, I usually do a Saturnalia, which is in the old, I think, Roman culture, where they take a week to just celebrate, to just do whatever crazy stuff they want to do as a way to just celebrate, and people reverse roles. So for me, I usually take my birthday month to just disconnect from what I normally do, just live a life that isn't mine, just travel to a different place, just try different things. I'm usually very like goal-oriented, productive, but for the month, I try not to do anything of such. And I had planned to go to Brazil and Colombia, but there was no real goal behind it. It was just live a life that wasn't mine. But then once the layoff happened, then it was a perfect timing, because just like a couple of months before that, I found out that one of my great great grandparents is from Brazil. So it was just like, oh my God, this is like a perfect opportunity for me to go find myself. And the story about my great grandfather ended up in Brazil is like slavery. They were taken as slaves there.
Yeah.
So, and he eventually worked his way out, bought his freedom, and then ended up going to Nigeria as a rich person and then settled there. So it was a story of triumph. And for me, it was like an opportunity for me to go back and connect to that, because I just got laid off. I have my freedom. So it's like I'm going back to a place that my ancestor was taken as a slave. As a free person, like I wanted to know how that felt. I wanted to know what would come off that, and what came off that was life-changing. That's a story for another time. But the basics of it is it gave me a new desire. It gave me it broadened my thinking bigger than it was before. My goals are less. I know more what I'm here for. I know the spirit that is within me, and I don't know the tangible aspect of that desire yet. But on a broader level, on like it gave me a goal, a new goal.
I really like that you shared that story, because what's really perfect about what happened in terms of your layoff is the timing of everything. Like, yes, a layoff happened, of course, never a welcome thing. Ideally, you know, if you want to move on to something else, you kind of do it on your own terms. But the good thing about layoffs happening is it forces you to take that next step that maybe you've been thinking about a long time. So I love that when the timing for the layoff happened for you, you had already lined up this trip that you were thinking about, and then now you found out all of this information about the background of your family and how it ties to this place that you're going to. So now you go to the place with like more of a mission, and instead of dwelling in your mind about this recent event that just happened, you can go there with this explorer's mindset. It's like, okay, I'm going to go find out about my family, find out about my history, find out about my people and what happened to them here. And that must have added like such a layer of purpose to the trip, because you said before, you know, it's usually just a time to disconnect, but now it gave you something like beyond that to go after.
Oh yeah, for sure. It definitely changed the energy of the trip. I was very, when the layoff happened, I was very positive about it. I'm still positive about it, but it still creates a spark in you. I don't think many people would just be like, oh, I got laid off. Okay. Like it wakes up something in you. And for me, it was the wake up call, like, dude, like you have to be in control of your own destiny. You have to be in control of your own story, like I alluded to earlier. And it was like, okay, what do I want my story to be? What do I want, the future generations of me? What do I want to tell them happened in this period? Mm-hmm. I was like, I don't know what I'll find out, but I want to tell them is I got laid off, and I used that as an opportunity because I was free. I have no one to answer to. I have nothing to rush back to. I can go back and connect to an history of lack of freedom, mm-hmm. and see how those two marry. And like you said, it was life-changing. It was a mix of emotions, not even mix, I was just like a spectrum of emotions. There was joy, there was pride, there was anger, there was contempt, there was anything you can imagine. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, it just created this beautiful energy in me of positive change, also of gratitude for whomever my ancestor was, and for them, striving, fighting their way to make it in life and create this opportunity for me. So I'm like, I have this, even though this bad situation is happening now, I I'm in a much better position than they ever were.
Yep.
I was on my Airbnb, I was looking at the ocean, the same ocean that you would have come through as a slave. I was staying there like a really fancy Airbnb, looking at the ocean, and I'm like, imagine what he must have been thinking at that point. Like, would I ever survive this hell? Like, he would not have been able to even think of any possibilities besides pain. But here I was, like his descendant, coming there of my own free will, living comfortably. It's just beautiful. And for me, it's like, it liberated me, it liberated me because I have no sense of, I don't have to prove anything, you know? Now it's just, everything is a dream now. It's like, we've made it. Because I even called my mom, I told her, I was like, if you know where we come from, you realize like we've made it. Anything else at this point is bonus.
Bonus points.
And when you're playing video games, let's say you're playing Mario, if you reach the bonus stage and there's like coins everywhere, are you afraid to like jump around? You're like, this is bonus. You're like just, you're collecting all the coins you can get in as little time as you can. And that's how life feels for me now. It's like, this is all the bonus stage and I'm just picking coins at this point.
Yeah. Honestly, yeah, the liberation that comes from that it's honestly key, and I couldn't put it any better. I think you had like a trip that honestly like lived through all of these aspects of concepts that I could only like conceptualize, and they were mostly in my mind. And so I knew that I had to change my mindset about like the layoff having happened. I knew that this could very well be a very positive turning point. But a lot of it was a mental exercise. But for you, it's almost like you had like a physical exercise. You were there in person. You were there connecting with, you know, an area that was really important to the history of your family and the history of Yoruba people in general.
Yeah.
So being able to kind of live through it and physically walk through it must have been incredibly cathartic.
Exactly. And it gave me a sense of identity now. Like now I've always been a proud Yoruba boy. And I say that like, not very sharp, but now I'm a proud Yoruba boy. Like, and I'm not saying like Yoruba is better than any culture or anything, but that's who I am, you know, that's how I came to this world. Yeah. And I'm super proud of that I want everyone else to feel that way about wherever they're from as well. If you're from a tribe in India, whether you're from a tribe in China, it doesn't matter. Like we should all be proud of where we are from, because I feel so much more creative now because I know that's my root. I know that's the source of my energy. Like I'm not trying to be a second-rate version of any other culture. You know what I mean? Like if I'm trying to think of a logo or something now, I know to just connect to my Yoruba roots. That's because it's gonna be unique. The fact that I'm in Canada, in tech, and I am able to bring in the energy of my Yoruba culture, it's just this beautiful mix that there's not a lot of competition. It's liberating. No one else
can do it the same way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There will be a lot of Yoruba people, but they're not doing the same things I do. And I think if everyone are able to see things that way instead of competing with everyone else, I think it's gonna be like a very amazing world for everyone.
Yeah, like a positive sum game instead of a zero sum game.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And even for Yoruba people as well, I want to empower them, you know, like because it makes it makes us stronger, you know. It's like a bigger pie. So it's like, oh, the more people can tap into that, the more they're able to create, the more I can take inspiration from them and we all grow together. And that's what that trip created for me. Just created this, you open this part of my brain that just didn't exist. I feel like a child. I feel reborn, so to speak.
Fantastic, man. I'd love to hear that. So that's a little bit about kind of where we are at the moment. Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about kind of I guess we've spent a lot of time talking about the pros of like a layoff situation. We should talk a little bit about the cons as well that can kind of like come up as a result of this. So one of the cons for me is the timing of everything. I think that's the best way to put it. So one of the issues that I had like early on in the layoff journey was figuring out like, okay, how long do I take a break for, and when do I get back into it? So there's no one to really tell you that. So it's really a positive, but it presents as a con at the beginning. It's like there is no set structure for how to handle a situation like this, and there's no right or wrong way to do it. It's just the way that works best for you. And for me, I realized very quickly that without this anchor of having a job or a career, that storyline, there was a time where I was a little bit lost, and dwelling in that being lost feeling isn't necessarily like a really good thing. And I think I spent like a little bit of time in there. By the time we were recording that episode 6 or 7, I had already kind of come out of that situation. But I remember that being like, I want to acknowledge that there's a part where like you're a little bit shocked, you're a little bit disoriented as a result of it, and it's okay to spend some time in it, but don't dwell too much in it, and don't put so much of your self-worth into something like that. I want to mention that because I did feel that a little bit. I remember thinking, okay, like I've been trying to, climb the rank in this particular industry. I've been trying to climb the ranks in this particular type of work. And now it's like, who are you as a result? Now that this is gone, like who are you going to be? Like it almost like was a bit of a blow to the identity. But when I started to climb out of that situation, I realized that it's similar to you, like what you were saying about designing your story. I realized who I am could be whoever I wanted it to be, and the possibilities are endless. So I want to acknowledge the con of having to feel that way, but like the positive side after that is like you can write the story however you want. We were talking off mic about the concept of a canvas. Yeah. We're talking about it from a Foreign Gems perspective, but your life is a canvas as well. And so when something like this happens, it's almost like you just wipe the canvas clean, and now you can start fresh. Like how are you going to design it now?
Oh damn, there's so much that I can add to that. One of it is, I'll stick to the canvas one for now. I used that analogy for someone the other day. I was like, I started seeing my life as a canvas, and as a painter, you take whatever colors you have and you work with it. And the better of a painter you are, the more you can work with whatever, you go into a room, someone gives you like some black paint, you find something amazing to create out of it, and you can create a beautiful art out of dark paint. And that's how I see a bad experience now. It's like, that's a black paint, like, but black paint is not bad or good. It's how you choose to interpret it. You can look at a bad experience and say, oh, this will break me. It can be like, no, this will be a success story. This will be like inspiration. I want someone to hear the story and be like, wow, it did this after this happened to them. Like, and that's the whole idea. I'm just trying to be more, accept whatever paint life gives me and paint a beautiful picture that it would be amazing. Everyone would everyone would be able to get inspiration from. And the other thing you mentioned was there will be a downtime for sure. For me, it was more of a week after the layoff. It wasn't sadness, it was just, identity, shock of identity. Like, who am I? I was just sleeping for the week after the layoff happened. I was just like, I wasn't doing anything. I was bad at sleeping before, so it was like, oh, okay, I can finally just learn this skill. So I was just sleeping every day. I think I told you. Yeah. And then after like 3 or 4 days, then I wrote like, the first thing that came to mind was like a 3-step plan, reset, which was what I was doing, and then explore, and then reconnect. So, I mean, I did the explore. I told you that was the desire. The reconnect is the next phase that I'm stepping into now, to like, okay, all these things that I've found, how can I bring it back to who I am now? But I had to take a little 1 week. We recorded the episode a day after your layoff happened. So was that how quick you bounced back?
Yeah, pretty much. So
okay, wow.
Tuesday morning is when I would have gotten laid off, and then we recorded Wednesday evening. So I had a bit over a day to like digest what had happened, and already pretty quickly, like I was looking for inspiration very quickly, and I think that's something that I was going to forget to mention until you just asked me that. Finding inspiring stories of people who have gone through a similar situation, or people living a life that you would desire, is really, really helpful. So that was super important to me. So I knew that, we'd already started this podcast. I was really interested in media and being able to maximize our impact through that. So it's like, you have this channel that you can work through and you can work at. So already I didn't feel like, I talked about the blow to the identity. I still had this connection to a thing that I was already building. So this podcast was helpful in that way. But then the other thing too is, I realized that the skills that I had they could be sold differently. They don't necessarily have to be sold to one company where they have control over my time and things like that. And the reason I realized that is through examples, like some that were on LinkedIn and some that are on YouTube, of people just turning. Some people actually did it willingly, like they maybe started a side hustle for a little while, and then they were like, okay, you know what, I'm fully committed to this side hustle now, I'm just going to leave my job. Or somebody got laid off and then they started their own, like offering their services in that way, or started a company or something like that. So I indexed a lot on finding examples of people who were in a similar situation but turned it positive. And that stopped me from wallowing in the negativity of the situation, because when it immediately happens, your first instinct, which is what happens to anybody in shock, is to try and protect yourself. And how else do you protect yourself? By finding a job immediately. So I knew, okay, I can't just act on the first instinct that comes. I need to take a second to really explore what the possibilities are. And for me, I'm the kind of person who loves potential. Like if I have a lot of options in front of me, that's the happiest you'll find me. When I start to narrow down, that's when I'm feeling a little bit trapped, you know? And so when I looked at all of these examples, I started to feel that excitement again. I was like, I am literally in the same spot this other person was at. Look what they turned it into. This person over here loved their side hustle so much that they turned it into a full-time thing. These people over here, they started a podcast, they had impact on this many people. All of those things were now all simultaneously possible at that moment. And so it really switched my mindset. So when we came to record, I was feeling like energetic.
Right.
I was feeling ready to go after it. I didn't know like what it was gonna look like, what I was going to do. I didn't even know I was going to do like my side hustle full-time or any of that. I was just I was excited by all of the various avenues that this situation could take me down. Obviously, some of them are negative, but I spent no time thinking about how it could go badly. I was just like, let me look at all of the positive ways that this could go, and then start just taking the steps towards making that happen. So by the time we recorded, I was feeling pretty good.
So this is great. Actually, it's funny, I reminded you. You reminded me from this, something else I forgot, which is you mentioned Anchor, having an Anchor. I guess this is the next segment, which is what we've found that have worked for us. For me, I've always, I mentioned that in the previous episode, I have responsibilities, obligations, or responsibilities to my family. That's always my anchor. It's like, no matter what I'm doing, I can pursue any creative project, I can fail, win, whatever I want. I still always have to have something to give back to these people. So that prevents me from becoming like a kite, It keeps me on a short leash. So that was helpful, I knew that. But, in a layoff or something like that, the first thing you want to do is you want to even like minimize, right? You want to like, I can't help as much. I did the opposite as soon as layoff happened. And I like helped more people. I was like giving away more stuff. But the idea was not because I was dumb or delusional or having a breakdown. The idea was exactly the opposite. I wanted to use that as even more of a forcing function. Like, I mentioned earlier on, can you be grateful when things are not going well? It's like, this is an opportunity for me to reflect on, how good I have it, even though in a bad situation. So helping other people makes me realize that I'm still in a fortunate position. I'm still in a position to help others. It could be a lot worse. That having that perspective, it energized me. And then also knowing that, there are people who are praying for me to figure out the next level. I can't fail. You can't fail when you are helping other people. It's just impossible. It's just the way the world is designed, because life doesn't, you become like a conduit. We mentioned that before. You become almost like a servant to life, and life would always find a way to provide for its own servant. I'm saying life, that's a substitute for God, universe, whatever you want to use. And for me, that was important to connect to that. And then going back home, connecting to a higher power. If you're religious, that might be a time to pray and stuff. For me, it's to connect to something bigger than me. You always have to connect to something bigger than you, whether your mission, whether your community, whether your sport, I don't know. Just find something bigger than you that you can be a small part of. For Mark, you mentioned, I don't know if you meant that explicitly, but you mentioned that you started a podcast. that was something bigger than you, because we had a mission, we have something we're building, and you are able to still connect to that, even regardless of what the layoff was.
Exactly.
And so that helped me. The other thing that helped them was the podcast itself. For me, I had the example of you, because we talked about it, and I was listening to myself just 2 months earlier, completely objective, giving advice and listening to you share your story. It was nice to be able to listen to myself and be like, oh, this was what you're saying. Now is the time to exercise that. And is what you're saying, was it true? Or if it's true, then believe it now. Mm-hmm. So those are things that helped me up to this point so far. What about you, besides what you've already mentioned?
I'd like to add your network or support system and like leaning on it. I think
last episode.
Yeah, like and this I also mean this like from as far as like something like your professional network, but also to as close as your close family and things like that. When something like this happens, it can kind of be embarrassing, is how it feels. It's not, because it happens to people all the time for various reasons, but you can feel a little bit embarrassed, and your initial response is to close, like shut off or disconnect from the people around you. And I would actually encourage anybody who's going through that, or somebody who's just kind of thinking about making a big change in your life, to actually lean on your network and lean on the people around you a little bit more. The reason I say that is, part of the reason I felt very optimistic right when that happened is because I talked to my family about it, and they were very supportive about whatever I decided to do next, because I was already thinking about, okay, maybe I should try this solo thing, things like that. And they were all very like, yes, like do that if you think it's going to be a better lifestyle for you than before, where we support you 100%, which is very encouraging, first of all, to hear from loved ones that their view of you hasn't changed in any way. You may view yourself like you just took like an L, or you're a failure or something like that, but to talk to other people who know you and who love and appreciate you, and hear them say like, that's not it at all, like we see this as a new beginning for you, also switches your perspective. So that's one side of it. But then the other side of it too was, I started to reach out to my network about potential opportunities for the consulting work that I had been doing, and the response was overwhelming. Like, not just on the post itself, but like people messaging me about like telling me how they feel, or that they went through something very similar, or that they're here, like if I ever need anything, pointing me in the direction of opportunities. It just felt like there was like a world of outcomes that could come next, and that this hadn't had a negative reflection on me. Like, nobody thought about me any differently. We're social creatures in the end of the day. Like, as much as I would like to never care what anybody else thinks about me, I do. And so I thought, like, okay, what does this look like? Those optics. And you can be stuck in your mind thinking this is what it appears, when in reality people are thinking about it in a completely different way. So do yourself a favor and get that reaffirmation that people don't think that. People believe in you, and they think that you're going to go places, and you've still got like a world of possibilities ahead of you. Learning that really early on was super powerful for me. It gave me the motivation to just like keep finding what it is, the desire essentially. Spend time figuring that out, and that I knew that whatever that desire ended up being, that I would have support in achieving that.
That's great. I had a very similar experience as well, where once my network started reaching out to me, my colleagues that I've worked with for almost 5 years, reaching out, saying how they miss me, and some people that didn't even have close relationship with me, just hearing the positive things they had to say, that was very helpful to me. So that's all I'll add on to what Mark was saying in regards to that. Something else that I found that was helpful, or that has been helpful because it's still ongoing, is creating a sense of control. Because when that happens, it's almost like a violation. It's like you have no control. But having a sense of control for yourself. For me, when it happened, they only give you like an hour or whatever to like log out of the systems and everything. I took my time. I wasn't like rushing. I like paused, like what would I do on a normal day? I started reaching out to people who I always had, appreciation for in the company. Started reaching out like, hey, thanks for this, thanks for that. For me, it gave me a sense of control of the situation, that even though I can't control that I'm leaving, I can control how I respond to it.
Yeah, how you leave.
And how I leave. Yeah. So I left, the way I would leave. Once again, back to, can you keep your positive mindset even when things are bad? And the other thing I did was I created a game plan. I mentioned that earlier. It doesn't matter if it's well thought out. It doesn't matter if it works. But it was just an illusion of control for myself. Like, yes, this week, even though I can't get out of bed, I'm just like sleeping every day. This is my week of reset. You know, it's part of the plan.
Exactly.
You know, you almost like you draw a vision above your chaos, part of something bigger. You know, join something, and something bigger could be your plan. Like this, oh, what have you been doing? I'm just sleeping all day, but it's okay. It's part of my plan for next 1 week, next 2 weeks, I'm sleeping. Oh, what are you doing after that? Oh, I'm traveling. It's part of the plan. I'm planning to explore. And that gives you that sense of control, which makes your vision clearer for the next step.
I love it. Okay, I'm trying to think of like anything that we haven't mentioned, and I can't come up with something. So, like, if you have anything else to add.
We mentioned the pitfall. We mentioned our experiences.
Yep.
We've mentioned what helped. I mean, you mentioned the nice act that I will use as well, which is understand yourself, know what works for you. What I would just say is, I don't know how it will play out. We'll do another update later on.
Yep.
We mentioned off record in the Fez episode that we'll have Fez on because he mentioned that he also got laid off years ago. That's how it led to his own career path. And he listened to our podcast, and that helped him get understanding on the layoff. So we mentioned that we would have an update in the future with 3 of us talking about where we are. So we'll see how things go. But for now, the next step for me is to follow that 4D thing, which is now, okay, what's my decision for the next thing? And I'll see where it takes me.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to be following your journey closely. As you know, we're friends. We hang out outside of the podcast and things like that. So I'll be knowing what's happening with you. You'll be knowing what's happening with me. But if you guys are curious to follow along the journey, we should leave like our LinkedIn or something like that in there so that people can follow along with the decisions that are made and how things kind of play out if that's of interest. No obligation, of course. But it's a place where you can keep up with this if that's what you're interested in.
Yeah, and also you might notice a bit of a difference in the podcast because we have more freedom. We both can discuss any and everything. You know, there's no obligation to any one shareholder. You know, you have clients. Your clients are like your employers in a way, but there's more of them. And that's the way I'm seeing it as well. You know, my old employer was my one client.
Yep.
One client that took all my time. So now it's like, how can I divide myself to more clients? So yeah, we'll talk about projects that we are working on as time goes on. We'll be more free to discuss things with y'all.
Looking forward to taking this journey with you, and anybody else who's going through a similar situation, feel free to reach out. Sometimes it's really nice just to have somebody who has gone through a similar thing, listening to you, talking to you about your situation, offering as much helpful advice as they possibly can. So like, we're here for that purpose as well if you feel you need it. Aside from that, we're gonna be back again next week with a brand new episode for you. And so we're really looking forward to that and maximizing the impact that we can have through this podcast.
Yeah, we don't know what the next episode is yet. We'll try over time to be giving you a heads up on what the next episode is. But we have to go back to the desire to know what we want to talk about. Design a plan, design a plan, and, you know, stick to it like we do. We've been doing so far every week, same time, same place. Giving you foreign perspectives to familiar topics within career and personal development.
And if you like what you hear, please do us a favor and give us like the highest rating you can on any of the platforms.
We have like 15 ratings now, and it's all 5 stars.
Somewhere. I would love for you to just like keep doing that. Share this with your friends.
Subscribe on YouTube. Our YouTube is looking kind of sad right now.
Subscribe on YouTube. Our last episode actually had the highest views we've had so far. So clearly people are liking, you know, our interview formats and things like that. So we're gonna try and bring more and more of those to you as soon as possible. But yeah, please subscribe because that gives us a signal that this is something we should be investing a lot of time and energy into.
Tell us who you want to hear from as well.
Would love any. And if you want to be a guest on the pod and want to share your story, just like reach out. We'd be happy to have you on.
Yeah, all we just ask is we want people to have something to take away from these episodes. So it doesn't matter what you do, how you do it, just tell us something that you think people might be able to take away from you, whether you have some crazy survival story or you had a hack that worked for you, to get into a position, or you have a unique perspective that a lot of people just don't discuss. Maybe you're like one of my old colleagues, she mentioned that childbirth is very, of course, difficult and traumatizing experience, and there's just not a lot of representation in that space.
Yeah.
And she's doing something to like help women.
That's very interesting. Yeah.
So that's a perspective that I don't know anything about. We'll probably have on podcast at some point just to understand how that works.
Super interesting. I already have a few questions for this person. I was just thinking about and before I start diving into a whole nother topic, I think we'll call it a podcast there. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you again next week.